What's up, New York Mets fans? It's your boy CP. Welcome back to another episode of the True Mets Talk podcast. This is going to be an update on the state of the New York Mets as of January 23rd, 2024. Lots of great content coming from the channel over the past week to week and a half. Make sure you're checking out all of those videos to refresh your memory about some of the overlapping topics that we'll be getting into on today's podcast. All of those links are going to be in the description of this video down below. Make sure you go check it out if you missed it and hit that thumbs up button, as well as getting a little bit more perspective from the other Mets content creators that I do those live streams with on the Interstate Mets Report and Mets Hot Stove Lives. Now, before we get into today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The channel is almost at 450 subscribers. I thoroughly appreciate the support. If you know anybody that's a Mets fan and hasn't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you tell them to do so. As you watch this video, if you haven't subscribed already, bottom right-hand corner, hover over the icon and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up button. I thoroughly appreciate the support, and comment your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. You know where to find me for more Mets talk and more podcast updates at CPNYSPORTS on X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you follow me on there. We'll be getting into some DH talk today. We'll be getting into a potential lineup shakeup. Hold on to your hats for that conversation, and we'll be talking about the relief market and the bullpen as it currently stands for the New York Mets heading into 2024. Without further ado, let's get into it.
The shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. It comes up, it's close to deep left field by Alvarez, and that's going to win 4 straight games for the second time in his he's home.
All right, let's start off here. Like I said, I gave my update last week about the DH situation and how I think the Mets are going to go the internal route based off of what David Stern said in his quotes to Andy Martino in his latest sit-down interview with Mr. Martino. But nonetheless, to back this notion up, most recently, Ken Rosenthal recently wrote in an article saying, quote unquote, the Mets do not seem inclined to spend on a DH this offseason, preferring to create opportunities for internal options like Mark Vientos. Now, we went over this topic back on the Interstate Mets Report back last Friday, and we talked about these projections that you see here on your screen for Mark Vientos from Fangraphs in terms of Mark Vientos being that DH option for the Mets this coming season. Now, the projections are what they are. I think that they're undercutting Vientos a little bit because I've said time and time again that Mark Vientos, with the power that he possesses, right? We know we're going to get the high strikeout rate, but the sheer power that he possesses in terms of the exit velocity, barrel percentage, when he finds the barrel, the ball goes a long way. We all know that. We saw that in his 9 home runs last season. I think he's upwards of a 20 to 25 home run guy in this league. They're projecting him at 245, a 746 OPS, 14 doubles, and 16 home runs. Like I said, I can see those numbers going a little bit north. But if he does hit for more home runs, presumably that average will dip a little bit to maybe 240, maybe sub 240, which is a little bit of a give or take scenario. But in year 2 of Mark Vientos, if we see 20 plus home runs from that DH spot in that platoon type scenario with DJ Stewart, and you see here, Fangraphs is already projecting that platoon with the 314 at bats they're projecting for Mark Vientos, then I will be absolutely satisfied with that, because I have said all offseason long, and I hate to be that guy, but I have to stick with this narrative because I truly do think this is the case. Mark Vientos isn't a long-term option and a long-term fit for this New York Mets team. I thoroughly think that this is the best opportunity for not only Mark Vientos, but for the New York Mets to showcase his ability this coming season and potentially part ways via some sort of trade package to bolster another area of the roster in the 2025 offseason. With him being positionless, I truly don't see it happening with the Mets long term, especially with the prospects that the Mets have coming up as soon as they are potentially going to be coming up here soon with the likes of Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, Drew Gilbert, all that good stuff. The nature of the business, with there only being 9 spots in the lineup and presumably an upgrade, hopefully, next offseason as far as the DH goes, I don't see Mark Vientos being that guy for the Mets. So I'll take these projections at face value for what they are. I think he can produce a little bit more in terms of the RBI and the home run category, even the doubles category. But I'm not expecting Mark Vientos to be the long-term solution. Now, like I said, I don't want to get too much into Mark Vientos in the internal route. I think the writing's on the wall. It is what it is. We're going to have to be okay with the platoon of DJ Stewart and Mark Vientos. And like I said, I'm fine with it. If that's how the Mets want to approach it, and if they're sticking to their plan and their strategy this offseason by not going and getting a Jorge Soler or a guy like Justin Turner, who I've advocated for this whole entire offseason, so be it. It is what it is. We can't change that fact. We have to deal with it. Ken Rosenthal also said in the same article that Starling Marte could potentially be a DH down the road for the 2024 New York Mets as well. And I'm going to have to be blunt here and say that I absolutely despise that idea. The only way that I can see Starling Marte DHing for this team is if Drew Gilbert is out there manning right field in 2024 for the Mets. But if that's not the case, Starling Marte is your right fielder as long as he's healthy. Now, like I said, if you get a sort of situation where the Mets believe that they can either platoon Mark Vientos at third base, which I highly doubt is going to be the case because I still don't think that his defense is anywhere near the level of being a major league third baseman. Or if you have to do it by default because maybe Brett Beatty goes down in an unfortunate scenario, right? Then maybe you get Starling Marte as your DH. But all things remaining consistent with the way this roster is shaking out right now and who we have up in the major leagues, Starling Marte is your right fielder, and I don't want him anywhere near that DH spot. Reserve those at-bats for Mark Vientos through and through. Now, that leads me into my next point here in terms of a potential shakeup to the Mets lineup in 2024. And I talked about this a little bit on the Interstate Mets report on Friday, and I gave a little bit of a different outlook than what you see here in the projected shakeup on the right-handed side of your screen. I have to give props where props are due. Shout out to Hector from Blunt Thoughts on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it. His Twitter account's going to be in the description down below. He actually commented under one of my posts, under one of my videos, talking about Brandon Nimmo potentially slotting into that cleanup spot right behind Pete Alonso to protect Pete Alonso in terms of the conversation that we've been having this entire offseason about who the DH is going to be. Because I've said it time and time again, if you're going to go the internal route with Mark Vientos as your DH, platooning with DJ Stewart, neither of those guys are sufficient protection for Pete Alonso in terms of scaring the opposing pitcher to giving Pete Alonso pitches to hit. We've been calling for this for 5 years now. Ever since Pete Alonso has come up with the Major League team in 2019, we've been calling for the Mets to address this protection of Pete Alonso in the fifth hole. Now, you see Fangraphs' projected Mets lineup. That is probably to a T what most people think the Mets lineup is going to look like in 2024. But I hate it. I genuinely hate it. I cannot see, even if Starling Marte provides you more than what he did in 2023, which we can't entirely bank on, I don't want him hitting behind Pete Alonso. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're not going to address that bat in this offensive market with your Jorge Solers or your Justin Turners, and if you don't want to put that added pressure on in year 2 of Francisco Alvarez being that protection for Pete Alonso, then Brandon Nimmo is the only other guy that you can confidently slot in right behind Pete Alonso to get the job done. You see Brandon Nimmo's 2023 numbers on your screen here down at the bottom. He hit 274, hit 24 home runs. The on-base percentage, even with the increased power, remained consistent. From the leadoff spot, he had 60 RBIs, which is phenomenal. and he hit north of 800 in the OPS category. We are slowly starting to see a rise, a trend in Brandon Nimmo's power metrics. And his approach at the plate was drastically different in 2023 than it was in 2022 leadoff spot, regardless of the on-base percentage remaining consistent. And like I said, I'm here because we're at the point of the offseason where we have presumably the personnel on this roster who's going to be on the 26-man roster heading into opening day. We have predominantly the majority of the team figured out. The only thing that I see the Mets doing is adding to the bullpen right now. I don't see the Mets adding anywhere else but the bullpen. So having the lineup and the personnel figured out and who's going to appear in the lineup, you have to start playing around with how this lineup's going to look. And I like the right-handed side of your screen more than the left, objectively. Because I'm not sure I want to slot in Francisco Alvarez and add that pressure on him in year 2 when we saw him struggle a little bit down the stretch in 2023, albeit his 20-plus home runs in his rookie campaign. I don't want him to have to face that pressure of being that guy right behind Pete Alonso if they pitch around Pete Alonso and get to Francisco Alvarez. I'm not sure that's fair to him in year 2. So the only other guy that I'm comfortable in terms of hitting the home run ball or driving runners in right behind Pete Alonso, if they decide to pitch around him, is Brandon Nimmo. If what we get in 2024 resembles what we got in 2023 from Brandon Nimmo, why not? That's my question here. Why not? And this is a very subjective topic. I understand that. So please, if you disagree, feel free to comment down in the comment section down below. There's no one size fits all, and there's no right or wrong answers here. But with the ability of Francisco Lindor to be a leadoff hitter, like we saw him do in Cleveland, coupled with the fact that we are starting to see, right, with the signing of Harrison Bader and with Drew Gilbert coming up, a difference in approach from Brandon Nimmo, why not try him out in the middle of the lineup to pair with Pete Alonso if you're not going to go the external route and get a power bat behind him? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And you can disagree, but all I'm saying is give it some thought. Give it some thought. So shout out Hector from Blunt Thoughts for proposing that. And obviously you see here down below, Jeff McNeil, Vientos, Beatty, and Bader would be rounding out your bottom 4 on the right-hand side of your screen in that projection, which I think is pretty solid because you can get Jeff McNeil, maybe a revamped Jeff McNeil that slaps singles, gets on base, and you have that supplemental power that I just talked about in terms of Mark Vientos' projections and my thought process of him beating those projections in the power category with Mark Vientos right behind him. And anything that you get from Brett Beatty and Harrison Bader at the bottom is just a cherry on top. So tell me what you think about this potential shakeup. Like I said, I am not going to advocate for it just yet, but my mind is starting to sort of see the personnel that we have and realize that the same old projections that we see time and time again on the left-handed side of your screen isn't productive or isn't as efficient as what you see on the right-handed side of your screen. Objectively, for me, in my thought process. Let me know if you agree. Moving on, some additional news around the league in terms of the reliever market. Complete 180. This is where the Mets, I believe, still need to make a move. We saw Josh Hader most recently sign with the Houston Astros. Didn't get above what Edwin Diaz got with 5 years and 102. He signed to the Astros for 5 years, $95 million. Robert Stevenson, still have to figure out what he's making with the Angels. I saw the initial report, and I forgot to sort of put in the concrete number and what he's getting over the 3 years with the Angels in that contract that he recently signed. But it is 3 years. I want to say it's $36 million, but like I said, it's not up here, and I didn't want to just sort of throw out a false number out there. So 3 years for Robert Stevenson. It sucks because that was a guy the Mets were presumably linked to as well. And he goes and signs with an Angels team that I quite frankly have no idea what their future holds or where they're going even after the whole Shohei Ohtani situation played out. So, and Aroldis Chapman signs to the Pirates for a 1-year, $11 million deal. This is also a name that Andy Martino sort of linked the Mets to as of yesterday. And then now 3 or 4 hours later, he signs on a 1-year deal with the Pirates. Not that I wanted Aroldis Chapman anyways on the New York Mets, but it is what it is. These relievers are starting to come off the board, and the Mets haven't made a move yet. But there's a lot of time left still, and there's a lot of names to sort of go off of here still left on the market, as you see down here on the bottom of your screen. This is the Mets' current bullpen outlook as of right now, today, January 23rd, 2024, heading into the 2024 season. From the 9th inning down, Edwin Diaz, Brooks Raley, Jorge Lopez, and Drew Smith. The ever-daunting Drew Smith serving meatballs right up over the heart of the plate for home runs. He's got to prove something else in 2024, or else he's out of here next season. He's out of here because Drew Smith hasn't taken that step forward that we all thought he was going to take. And he has good stuff. I'm not going to put that past Drew Smith. He has great stuff and a lively fastball. His location is just terrible and has been terrible. So hopefully we get a different version of Drew Smith, although I'm not going to bank on it. And you have Michael Tonkin, Austin Adams, and Sean Reed-Foley rounding out the front end of your bullpen. And guys like Michael Tonkin and Austin Adams, I truly do think are going to have a lot bigger of an impact on this 2024 Mets bullpen than people give them credit for. And I think that those can be gems of finds for David Stearns at the front end of the bullpen. Off-speed heavy, slider heavy, a lot of movement on those off-speed pitches, those secondary pitches. And I think that they can play very well for the Mets bullpen moving forward. But it needs work. Objectively, with Edwin Diaz coming off of such an injury, significant injury, last season in the World Baseball Classic, that knee injury, you got to alleviate some pressure off of Edwin Diaz. He can't come in for 4-out saves. He can't come in for 5-out saves anymore. He's not going to be able to do that, at least not right away. So you need an 8th inning option. And I like Brooks Raley. I like him a lot, especially with what he's been able to produce over the last couple of years statistically. But I don't think he's a lockdown 8th inning guy. I think he's a lot more well-suited for the 7th inning. And you just have to slot and move down each of these guys in the event that they sign an 8th inning type guy. Jorge Lopez, another underrated signing, did well in the World Baseball Classic for Team Puerto Rico. Was once an elite closer for the Baltimore Orioles, and then struggled when he went to the AL Central with Minnesota. Can Jeremy Hefner and this focus on this pitching lab help a guy like Jorge Lopez get back to what we saw him be in Baltimore? That could be a potential underrated 1-year deal that David Stearns has already given out. And like I said, Drew Smith, the wild card. I don't have any projections on him. I don't have any expectations. He's just either going to go out there and prove me wrong or he's not. But I don't really have any faith in him. So here are your top relief pitchers still out there on the market. Like I said, it's January 23rd, and you still have a lot of names here left to choose from. I've been advocating for Hector Neris all offseason long. I think it's a little bit of a long shot in terms of getting Hector Neris. He's going to want a multi-year deal, and the Mets just simply haven't shown the commitment to give anybody a long-term deal, no matter what position they play, offensively or pitching-wise. It's just not going to happen. We saw with Robert Stevenson, them being linked to him and him signing a 3-year deal. Presumably, that's why the Mets were out. I would have to sort of deduce and guess. Ryan Stanek is a name that I really like. Lively fastball, coming from an Astros organization, has playoff experience. I like Ryan Stanek, and I think he's more in line for a 1-year deal as opposed to a guy like Hector Neris, who really revamped his career in Houston. Let's call a spade for what it is. Wandy Peralta, same sort of situation. Love him from the left-handed side of the mound. has had a great sample size for the last 3 years for the Yankees, but I think with what he's been able to produce over there in the Bronx, I think he's in line for a multi-year deal, and I think that's going to take the Mets out of it, unfortunately. Objectively speaking, I hope I'm wrong. Some more realistic options for the Mets. David Robertson, maybe a potential reunion. What version are we going to get from David Robertson in a potential reunion? The version that we saw in Queens or the version that we saw in Miami in that trade that sent Marco Vargas here for David Robertson? I think that's a little bit more of a realistic option given the Mets' sort of strategy and any sort of budgetary constraints they may or may not be working with. Both David Robertson and Matt Moore probably are the realistic options on both sides of the mound, right-handed and left-handed. Kenyon Middleton also had a great 2023, a guy that might be in line for a one-year deal to keep proving himself in this reliever market. Maybe he goes out there and replicates his 2023 numbers in 2024 and hits the open market again in 2025 and gets himself a nice little 2 to 3 year deal. So a lot of options here across the board. There's still names out there, and there's still names that can help the Mets bullpen in 2024, regardless if it's a 1 or 2 year deal. So let me know what you think about the Mets' current outlook in the bullpen. I think it's serviceable. I think guys like Lopez, Tonkin, and Adams, those additions are underrated. Right now, for what the Mets fan base is looking at this bullpen and calling it, I think those additions are underrated. But this bullpen objectively still needs work, and they need a lockdown 8th inning guy. And they need to shift Brooks Raley to that 7th inning. You get Jorge Lopez in the 6th inning, Brooks Raley in the 7th to set up one of the names on the list here in the 8th, and set up Edwin Diaz in the 9th. I think you're in great shape with the bullpen. So give me one more bullpen piece, Mr. Stearns, and then call it off season if you want to. Because honestly, like I said, I don't expect anything offensively in terms of the bat market. I don't think that they're going to go out and sign a bat. I've pretty much given up hope on that. Although if we hear some more steam, I will continue to advocate for Justin Turner, but I just don't think it's going to happen. One more bullpen piece is what I can see, and the Mets round out their offseason. So let me know what you think. State of the Mets as of January 23rd. What do you think about the lineup? Can we see a potential shakeup? Do you like Nimmo in that cleanup spot behind Pete Alonso? Or would you prefer the Mets go the more traditional route in terms of what they've been doing in seasons prior with Nimmo leading off, Lindor and Pete in the middle, and either Alvarez or Marte serving as that protection for Pete Alonso? And then let me know how you think or what you think about this bullpen right now as it currently stands versus the options that we just went over that are still available to the Mets. This has been another episode of the True Mets Talk podcast. Like I said, we'll be dropping some more thoughts and opinions on this team, especially throughout this week. One of my next videos, spoiler alert, is probably going to be talking about Mike Vasil. Probably the most ready pitching prospect that the Mets have to furnish. I would have to bet that he's going to make his debut in 2024. So I'll be talking a little bit more about him, giving you all some more insight about my thoughts and opinions about Mike Vasil and how he projects in the major leagues potentially with the New York Mets this coming season and in the future. But regardless, thank you all for tuning in. I thoroughly appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions about everything and anything you heard in today's podcast episode, and follow me on X and Instagram at CPNYSPORTS. This one was another episode of the True Mets Talk podcast. It's your boy CP. I'm out. Peace. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the CP New York Sports Pod. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions, and use the lower right-hand button of this video to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.